One of the best games and probably one of the most legitimate upsets I've seen in quite a while happened this past Saturday with Florida State not only beating Alabama, but dominating them. So, who else would be better to talk about this than my buddy TJ here from Double Fries No Slaw and College Football Addiction? The links are below. TJ, man, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm still a little bit in shock, to be honest with you. I haven't come down off the mountaintop yet. So it's Monday night. We're about 48 hours out from the end of the game, 49, I guess. So yeah, I know I'm still riding pretty high. I mean, Florida State, it wasn't just so much shocking. And we saw a big upset on Thursday night when Boise State got absolutely embarrassed by USF. Like, big upsets happen, and so it wasn't just that they won, because shoot, this could have been a game where Ty Simpson came out and threw 3 picks, or there was a punt return touchdown, or the rain impacted some things, and you just said, oh, well, they got lucky. And that's how I thought they were going to have to win. I 100% never would have guessed, and I don't think anybody would have guessed, truly understood that Florida State was going to come out and dominate this game. And so to me, that's what's so shocking. It's not just that they won, it's how they won. It's not just that they, they beat Bama up, right? I'm trying to keep myself censored so much because I'm so hyped up at this point. But they punched Bama in the mouth, right? And Bama said, all right, we'll go in our little SEC corner and we'll be done for the evening. So it was shocking to me that Florida State was tougher, that they were more physical, they wanted it more, and I'm so impressed by the mindset that has changed in the last 9 months in Tallahassee.
230 rushing yards against Alabama. Folks, you didn't hear that wrong. My mic didn't mess up. 230 rushing yards. Now, here's the interesting thing. If I'm looking at a stat sheet, y'all had the ball about the same amount of time. Overall, y'all had 382 total yards. They had 341 total yards, but the 230 on the ground, and then y'all only allowed 87 rushing yards. Now, yeah. I know that Alabama is doing a new thing, passing the football and all this bunch of stuff. Y'all even had a turnover.
Yeah.
They didn't have a turnover. It was just that dominant. The first downs was 20 y'all, 18 them. I mean, it's just crazy. What's the feeling in the Florida State family? I mean, what's it like right now? Because last year was one of the worst come parts I've ever seen in my entire life. So, and then the year before that, you guys had an incredible run. I mean, are y'all like having split personalities, like the moment thing? What's going on?
It is night and day, isn't it? It is. It is. I was hanging out with a buddy that was watching the game, and just, he said it's light and dark. That's what it is. One year light, the next year dark, the next year light. You were talking about the run game. I'll talk about that, but I don't know if I'm more surprised by us running for over 230 yards on Alabama or holding them under 100. Brian, when the first drive they had 50. If they scored on a 9-minute drive with 50 rushing yards, ran the ball down our throats, and I will say, I thought we looked pretty good on that drive. They were just getting 3 and 4 yards a carry and just motoring it down, 15-play drive. But if I'd have looked at you and said, hey, I know they just had 50 rushing yards. The rest of the game, they're going to have 36. I think you would have said, TJ, go get your head checked. What are you talking about? They're going to have 36. If I'd have told you that Florida State was going to run for nearly 200, I mean, if you take the sack yardage out, Castellanos got sacked one time, which that's surprising. Castellanos got sacked one time. You take the sack yardage out, they nearly ran for 250 yards.
Wow.
Who does that against Alabama? That's just not that's not real life. If you'd have told me that when we were talking about this game last week, I'd have said you're crazy. So you won in the trenches against a Bama team that's got 5 stars and high 4 stars everywhere. So you asked about the mood. I don't want to say that 2-10 has been completely forgotten because let's be honest, it was one game. And maybe Bama's terrible. Maybe Bama goes 6-6 this year, right? I don't know. Football's dumb. I would have never thought we went 2-10 last year. But I don't want to say that 2-10 has been removed from everybody's mind, but the way that they looked on Saturday has removed most of it from people's minds. And now, listen, they got to go back it up. They got to go win a lot more games. They got to go compete. But I think they will. the way that they played has completely changed the mood. Where people were, I mean, when we talked about this game before, we were hoping to lose close. We were saying, man, we get out of this with a 3-point loss and Bama goes to the playoff, we'll be feeling pretty good about ourselves. Maybe we can upset Miami. Maybe we can upset Florida. Now I think we look at the schedule and say, man, there ain't a team on this schedule that we can't compete with. Not that we're going 12-0, not that we're winning 10 games, not that we're going to go to the playoff, none of that. But there's not a game on the schedule that you can't be in, that you can't compete with. I mean, I had terrible feelings about the Clemson game, and I still would pick Clemson if that game happened tomorrow. But I don't think we go in there and get blown out if we play like we did on Sunday, right? Like if you play, or Saturday, if you play with the effort and intensity, I think Clemson will get better. I mean, I know they lost this weekend. I think they'll be fine this year. But I do think if Florida State plays with that kind of effort and intensity, stays relatively healthy, I think the mindset is you can be in every game. Now, who knows what happens, because football's weird and weird things happen. But I think the mood is pretty good right now, if you can't tell by my hype.
You sound like you've had a double espresso.
Yeah.
And a bowl full of sugar. And a bowl full of sugar. Yeah. Alabama, if I saw this stat correct just a second ago, because I was switching in between stats and going to y'all's schedule, looking at next week for y'all, which is a yawner. Alabama's leading rusher only had 31 yards. In what galaxy? Just like, and I was talking about this the other day after the game, that Alabama, if someone's like 20 years old right now, maybe 25, all they've been accustomed to is an Alabama team who's unbelievable. Like, impose their will, win multiple national championships. Even last year, you had some really good flashes of unbelievable football players. But I told people, I was like, look, this is an Alabama team. What we saw, y'all pushing them around. You and I are around the same age. We were used to this. We've seen Alabama get pushed around pre-Nick Saban. And a lot of people's not used to seeing that. Do you think that maybe this is a turn, pun intended, of the tide in college football? That maybe the SEC is like the king has definitely been dethroned, and by all people, a team that just went 2-10 out of the ACC?
Yeah, they seem soft, right? And I'm not saying the SEC in general, but I do think Alabama seemed really soft on Saturday. Yeah. There is no world where Florida State should have been the more physical or more imposing team. They might have tried harder, right? Like, you should try harder when you're an underdog. Let's be honest. But man, right. Castellanos gave them all the bulletin board material. Florida State's team and players and confidence that you heard through the offseason. Like, man, if that didn't fire you up to go out there and kick some tail in a game that everybody was picking you to win, the thing I think, man, like, Bama got punched in the mouth, and I think that they didn't know how to respond to it because they were soft. Now, I'm not trying to call out any Bama players or their staff, DeBoer, anything like that, but I don't think they expected Florida State to punch back. I think they listened to an entire offseason of people telling them that they were going to roll over, again, no pun intended, Florida State. and when they got punched in the mouth, they didn't know how to respond to it. And they looked shell-shocked. And I'll tell you that, the crowd was great. Florida State, the team gave the fans something to cheer about early with the long pass to White and then the touchdown to tie it up. But I mean, they looked shell-shocked. And man, their fans had no clue, because all they heard for 9 months was, man, this team that just went 2-10 is got to go up against this Bama team that got snubbed from the playoffs. Bama's going to wipe the floor with them. And I think once there was no thought in their mind in certain ways. Like, I think about like when Jameis played and when Trevor played and when Deshaun played and stuff like that. Like, there was no thought in their mind that they were going to lose, but it was because of an internal confidence. I think Bama's confidence came from external factors, and that was everybody for 9 months telling them that they were going to beat the crap out of Florida State. And when things didn't go their way, they just looked soft. And again, I'm not trying to be a jerk by saying that. Like, they can go into Athens in 3 weeks and beat the heck out of Georgia, and then we'll think Bama's fine again, and we'll probably think even better of Florida State at that point. But I do think that they were shell-shocked. And I mean, maybe that's the wake-up call they needed. But yeah, changing of the guard, the tide is rolling over, whatever kind of cliche you want to use there. It doesn't seem like, and there's a lot of game to go. And again, we talked about not being so reactive for one game, but it doesn't seem like Alabama's a playoff team right now.
No.
and they've got to play LSU. They got to go to Georgia. They got to play Oklahoma, who plays Michigan this week. They got a lot of tough games. They got to play Auburn, who looked good on Friday night against Baylor. They got a lot of tough games on that schedule. Tennessee. So I don't know, man. I think that it was a little bit of shock for them, and maybe it's the wake up call they need, but maybe they're just not that good. Maybe they're an 8-4 team. Maybe, maybe you just, when you don't have Nick Saban there, you go 9-3 and 8-4 every once in a while. Like, I mean, that's just kind of how things work in football. And so, yeah, I don't know, man, but yeah, again, all that said, to wrap it all up, put a bow on it. Yeah, I think they were soft and mentally, physically, that's what we saw on Saturday.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you this. I even talked about it on your show when you had me on. Everybody go check out the College Football Addiction. Also check out Double Fries No Slaw. The link is below. TJ, as always, I appreciate you being on here. No, I'm not going away, but I just like to say that mid-video. Y'all go check it out and subscribe if you haven't already. But last week when I was on your show, we were talking about this game. And I said, look, I always hesitate when I hear guys like Castellanos run their mouth in the offseason, because more times than not, it does not end up like it did on Saturday.
Doesn't work well, man.
This guy comes in and delivers.
Yeah.
But I talked about Gus Malzahn, that he eats, sleeps, breathes, lives these games. And I haven't went and did the research on this text, TJ, but I'm pretty sure that Malzahn texted, actually, or not text, he actually tweeted, or whatever it is now, about I don't know if it was before the Bama game or after the Bama game. He said something along the lines of it being familiar, which was kind of a shot at them because he gave Nick Saban fits. And here he is at Florida State as an OC, just demolishing Alabama. You know that it was ticking them off.
Yeah, I think he tweeted something like, just like old times or something like that. Like, just phenomenal. Again, I said this when the Thomas Castellanos stuff happened. This sport is entertainment, right? Sure, and you may not like what Castellanos said. You may think like, oh, well, that's going to come out. No, it's entertainment. We're supposed to have fun. That was the perfect shot. You don't have to say a bunch of things or just a little subtle hint to, yeah, buddy, that meant a little bit more to me. I saw people say like he goes into Neo from the Matrix and sees green when Alabama Crimson comes on the field. Good. He was in his bag. He was so good. I thought Tony White was really good on the defense side too, but on Malzahn specifically, he did such a good job of saving things. He saved the wheel route. I thought was huge or down the sideline. He saved that until they were up by a lot in the second. He did a good job with the guy in motion, and Castellanos did a really good job of reading when to hand that off. It wasn't always great. There were a couple of times we got tackled for a loss, but Castellanos did a good job of reading that. They did a good job of switching those guys out. We ran it one time with our like third string running back, and my buddy was like, "Why the heck are they doing that?" And I was like, "Well, because you can't do it with your fast, motion slot guy every single time because they're going to know you're handed off." And so we lost 2 yards on it that time. We didn't run it with third string running back. The very next time we go to run it with the great guy, and Castellanos goes for like 15 yards. So I thought it was really, really well done from a play call execution standpoint. Castellanos never threw the ball in harm's way. I think he went 9 for 15 for the game, or 10 for something like that. So he only threw the ball 15 times, but was pretty accurate. Two of them were, one was a drop and one was just a straight, the defender broke it up, made a good play on the ball. So, I mean, never put the ball in harm's way. There was never going to be a turnover. He took care of the ball running it. He didn't take a lot of hits. They coached it up really, really well. Now, by all that said, you got to do that against everybody else, right? Maybe not East Texas A&M or, Kent State or whatever, but you got to do that when you play Virginia, and you got to do that when you play, Pittsburgh and Virginia Tech and some of these other teams that you're supposed to beat. You got to keep it going well. But, I thought Malzahn, I mean, there were so many heroes in the game, but Malzahn was, he's got to be one of the top at the top of the list for sure.
Without a shadow of a doubt. I'm looking at the box score right now, everyone. If you haven't seen, you need to go check it out, because once again, if you're used to the Alabama that we've been seeing since, 08, 09, somewhere in there, this is going to be like speaking a foreign language to you. Florida State scored at least 7 points in all 4 quarters of the game. Alabama, this is from first, second, third to fourth quarter. They scored 7, 0, 3, and 7.
No.
Yeah. And talking about Castellanos, what's really impressive, he was 9 of 14, 152 yards in the air. Ty Simpson, a guy who's sat there, waited. He was 23 of 43 for 254 yards. So he had 102 more yards than Castellanos, but he was hurling the ball a lot. So that's interesting. Before we move on, is there any other thoughts you want to say about just the game? Because I do want to take a look at Florida State's schedule. I want to take a look at Alabama's schedule, and we'll probably start there before we move to Florida State, because I'd just like to hear your thoughts on a few big games that they have coming up.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing on the game is, again, Florida State had a really good performance in 2021 against Notre Dame as like a 17 or 18 point underdog. They were down by 18 points. They came all the way back. They forced overtime, and then they lost in overtime. And Florida State fans I don't say enjoyed that loss, but they were somewhat relieved with that loss. They had won 3 games the year before during the COVID season, Mike's first year, and we don't like moral victories. I get it, but I didn't have a problem with them celebrating that close loss because it did seem like we were turning the direction. The very next week, they played Jacksonville State, and they fell flat on their face in one of the most embarrassing losses that Florida State fans can ever remember. And I don't think they have any chance of losing to East Texas A&M State from Commerce, Texas this weekend, because it's just such a different, Jacksonville State went up to the FBS the next year. They were a fairly good team, and Florida State's relatively healthy going into this thing. But it may not be that week. It may not be the Kent State game, who I think they're pretty terrible too. But you can't go up and lose to Virginia in a few weeks. You can't get embarrassed by one of those big 3 games that are left: Florida, Miami, and Clemson. Like you did this, all right, great, but you got to build on that, right? And you may drop a game you're not supposed to. You may lose somewhere you're not supposed to. You may win another one that you're not supposed to. But I want to see more than just a one game that maybe was against a bad Bama team or an overrated Bama team. I want to see them build on it. So yeah, from the game, I mean, I don't know if you have enough time for me to give every shout out that I've got, but the trenches were really good. Coaching was really good. They stayed healthy. They need to continue to stay healthy, but they need to build on this and continue to improve, because in all reality, that was the first time that a lot of those guys had played together ever. And you would think that things would get better as a team stays together longer, and that would be good news for Florida State and bad news for the teams they play this year.
Your trenches last year was embarrassing.
Yeah.
And the other night, I'm telling you, there was one play. I say the other night, the other day, there was one play, TJ. I can't remember it, but it was early on. And I saw your offensive line out in space just brutalizing people. And I went, oh my Lord, what voodoo is this? It's crazy, because in 24, y'all had a lot of transfer guys then, and it didn't work out. You got a bunch of transfer guys now, and it majorly worked out. But yeah. I think it comes back to coaching and Malzahn. A side note, I believe Florida State is the first ACC team to have the $50,000 fine for rushing the field. So congratulations.
Okay.
Hey,
I got a question. Yeah. Is Clemson still allowed to put people on the field after the game? How does that work? I'm not joking. I'm not trolling.
Sure,
is Clemson still allowed to do that, or is the ACC going to get pissy about it?
So a friend of mine who's watching this right now was at the game the other night, the game of which I don't want to speak. But he said that everyone had to wait. If I understand correctly, everyone had to wait until the visiting team was off the field. If I remember correctly, then everyone could come on the field.
Okay. That makes sense.
Think about that.
So there's a difference between jumping over the sides while the other team and the officials are there and entering the field like through the tunnel when everybody's gone and things like that. That does make sense.
If I understand correct. Yeah.
They should charge Clemson $5,000 for that. Florida State and Clemson have veto power. They should just be able to veto that and say, like, nah, we ain't paying it. Like, sorry, take it up with the settlements.
hey, they just go, we'll see you in court.
Yeah. Do you want to go down this road again?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was well worth every penny.
Okay, so of course I've talked about your other channel, College Football Addiction, where you cover all of college football. So let's kind of switch in that vein and talk about Alabama for just a moment, because they are one of the most dominant teams in history because of a man who no longer coaches there. And they're finding out really quick that sure, Alabama is a historical team, but Nick Saban brought the magic. Let's talk about the rest of Alabama's schedule. Of course, this upcoming game, they have UL Monroe, not worried about that. You have Wisconsin, which is up and down, but you're at Georgia. That will be interesting. You have Vandy. I'm not really worried about that. Missouri, you never know what Drinkwitz is going to bring to the table. You play Tennessee in Tuscaloosa. you're at South Carolina. You have LSU coming to town. Then you have Oklahoma coming to Tuscaloosa. And of course, you finish at Auburn. Try not to get too ahead of ourselves here, man. But after the other night, if we don't see that many changes with Alabama, and maybe Alabama can be brutalized, what do you think about their season as a whole and who could take advantage of them?
So I'm looking at their schedule now. I couldn't see them losing either of the next two. Like Wisconsin, that would really shock me if Wisconsin was able to get it done. Georgia's tough. And I don't think that, I mean, Georgia played Marshall this weekend, right? So, but I mean, as of right now, I'd pick Georgia in that game. And I know Kirby's got this thing where he just can't beat Alabama. If they can't beat them this year, then come on, man. Like, dude, figure something out, right? Like, it's kind of like the reverse of how, like Napier can never beat Georgia. Like everybody has that one team they just can't get by. But I mean, I'd be pretty surprised to see them beating Georgia now. I do think they'll beat Vandy, and I do still think they'll beat Missouri. Like I do think Bama probably figures it out. Tennessee, I'm not sold on them. Like they couldn't put Syracuse away they needed to. The game against Lenore, I mean, but here's where it's trouble. 3 games in a row, they could certainly lose. And if the games happened this upcoming weekend, I'd probably pick them to lose all 3. I don't think they beat Lenore Sellers in South Carolina on the road in Columbia. I don't think they beat LSU right now, and I'm not very confident that they beat Oklahoma, though we'll find out a lot more about these teams as the year goes on, right? Like that's just a one game kind of overreaction. And then things get weird on the plains. Like they could certainly, I mean, a disaster scenario is they lose to Georgia, South Carolina, LSU, Oklahoma, and Auburn. Like that's a 6-6 disaster scenario. And I don't think that happens, right? I'm not predicting that right now. I think Alabama's probably still going to wind up like 9-3. There's a big benefit to playing some of these big games that they've got at home. Talking about LSU and Oklahoma. And then we'll see how Auburn plays in SEC play. I know they looked really good against Baylor the other night. But that's also a Big 12 team that doesn't quite have the trenches that Auburn has. And so Auburn, I'd take Alabama right now over Auburn, but the disaster scenario is, they could go 6-6. The SEC and their schedule is very tough. And I mean, we didn't even mention the fact that they got to go on the road to play Missouri. They got to play Tennessee and Vanderbilt, who both beat them last year. Now I'd like Alabama to beat both of them this year, but I mean, I guess a disaster scenario could be even less than 6 wins. But I think their floor right now is 6-6, 7-5. Their ceiling is still 10-2. I mean, there's still a ton of athletes on that roster, and this could be a situation where you just got punched in the mouth one time and it kind of galvanizes you and you get a lot better. I don't think they're an 11-1 team, but they could certainly be 10-2. And at 10-2, they'd be fighting for an at-large bid in the playoff. I think I'd probably have them closer to 9-3, 8-4, but it's 1 week. If they come out and I mean, they're going to beat Louisiana Monroe by 1 million, and then if they beat Wisconsin pretty handily, that Georgia game will be really hyped that they play in Athens on September 27th.
If Kalen DeBoer wins less than 9 ball games, is he still the head coach at Alabama at the end of this season?
I would guess yes. I would think so. But man, they won't like it. And he'll go into year 3 on a raging fire hot seat. The problem is, 247 and recruiting rankings and talent team composite rankings are not the end all be all by any means. But you changed your OC. You went and got Ryan Grubb, who you'd worked with before. You have literally the second most talented roster in all of college football. They are number 2 on the 247 composite team rankings that factors in all your recruiting and all of your transfers and people's production and everything. That's not a rock solid, like Florida State was like top 15 last year and they won 2 games. So you can have a talented team that doesn't play well together. But man, when you've got all the talent in the world, when your staff is paid like one of the top 5 staffs in the country, when your head coach is making what he's making, when you had success elsewhere, and so people are expecting you to be good, when you're following the legend that is Nick Saban, their expectations are way too high for him. And maybe that's unfair to him, but he knew that signing up. So, I think DeBoer's a good coach. I don't really know how much of it was coaching the other night. They just were soft. And so, maybe, instilling the mentality is his problem. And so there is some issue with him on that side. But 8-4, I don't think they fire him, but I mean, I think every Bama fan in the world wants him gone if that's the case. And I mean, I even think 9-3 would be kind of they'd feel similar if they didn't make the playoff at 9-3. Which losing to Florida State is not a great way to make the playoff at 9-3 because that's not necessary. I mean, if they go on to win 10, 11 games, sure they'd be fine. But that's not necessarily considered a good loss, right? And so, I don't think they would fire him at 8-4. I mean, unless they just get embarrassed in those four, Georgia beats the heck out of him, and LSU beats the heck out of them, and Oklahoma, one more. But it certainly wouldn't be pretty if they did it.
Yeah, I'm sitting here almost like watching a soap opera, going, what are they going to do? Because it's just, again, I don't know if you remember this. I remember Nebraska being so dominant for so long.
Yeah.
And then Tom Osborne retires. Frank Solich takes over, even gets them to the national championship. They got bested by 0-1 Miami, but that's who 0-1 Miami played in the national championship. And then Solich, I think he gets fired. Then things really start to change. And it was just like this weird feeling. It was like, hold on, this is an end of an era. I think you probably know the stat better than I do. Something like 30 straight years that Tom Osborne had won at least 9 ball games. And here they are, under 9 wins. Everybody's losing their mind. I think they fire Solich at 8-4, and it really goes, down the crapper. So it will be interesting to watch this and what it does to the culture of college football. Let's flip back over to your other channel, Double Fries No Slaw. Let's talk about Florida State coming up. You play a team that I didn't even know existed, East Texas A&M. I feel confident with that. Kent State, I feel confident with that. Virginia put a thumping on a very bad Coastal Carolina team. That will be an interesting game. But let's talk about Miami. Miami won last night. They beat Notre Dame. A lot of people still think about Notre Dame, the team that just came out of the college football playoff, but it's a different team. How are you viewing, and I'm just going to highlight the big games. You have Miami, you have Clemson, you have Florida. How are you viewing these games now after the other day?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that looking at that Miami game and looking at that Florida game, looking at those Clemson games, I don't think Florida State fans really felt like they had a major chance to win that. I think it was kind of like, if we get lucky, or they, Lagway has an injury, or Beck's not very good, then maybe we could get him. I don't think anybody gave Florida State a chance to go up to Clemson and win, right? So I don't think any of that's true anymore. I think it's 100% Florida State can win any game they go into if they play like they played against Bama. That's not saying they will win. Yeah, I would bet a lot of money that they don't go 12-0. But they could win any game that they walk into. Conversely, if they play poorly, they could lose to the Virginia Techs and the NC States and the Virginias and the Pitts of the world, right? I think they're pretty much a guaranteed win against like the Wakes and Stanfords and East Texas A&M and Kent State. Yeah, those are wins, right? But for a lot of these other teams, you could win some of the ones you're not supposed to, but you could also lose some stuff. So that's why they have to bring that edge. To me, it's easy to get up for Alabama. Who can't get up for Alabama, right? Like that. I mean, whether you win or lose, like you should at least get up for it. Is it easy to get up for Wake Forest? Is it easy to get up for Virginia Tech or Pitt, Virginia on a Friday night in the ACC where stuff is weird? So anyway, so you asked me about the big 3 games. I mean, that Miami game is going to be fun. Miami looked pretty good most of the night last night. I mean, they almost had a Mario special and blew it there at the end, but they found a way to win. And Beck looked pretty good. He forced a couple of things. That was an incredible catch by CJ Daniels to get the touchdown there late in the first half that put them up. But yeah, I mean, I think Miami looks pretty good. Their trenches are really good, and they played really well, right? Like Bama had good trenches, we thought, but then they didn't play super well. Miami's trenches are going to play good, and that'll be a tough test for Florida State for sure. Clemson, we'll learn more about them as the year goes on. I thought Saturday night actually said more about and I don't know what your take has been on this, but I thought Saturday night said more about LSU than it really did about Clemson. But Clemson certainly has some faults and things that they need to work on. And it's a long year, and the Florida State and Clemson will look way different by the time we get to the beginning of November. And then that game against Florida in the Swamp, I don't really know what to think about Florida either. And man, they could be a really good team that's 7-4 going into that game, right? Because they just played an absolute murderer's row of a schedule. And so Well, what does that mean when we get to it? Like Florida State, maybe they've got 9 wins at that point. They need that win to get into the college football playoff, or, they need that win to have a little bit more respectable of a year. And Florida's year is done, right? Their best hope is to upset the team trying to go there. So it's so hard to really know like this early in the year. But again, I think Florida State has a chance to be in every game for the rest of the season. And I certainly don't think that was the outlook 3 days ago.
I'm going to ask you a very pessimistic question. We know that 2 years ago you had Jordan Travis. I was blown away by how tough the guy was during that time. He got beat up a lot, especially when they played Clemson that year. I think he couldn't even move his left arm really good. He just kept playing. He did very well. We know what he did at Florida State, and I have a lot of respect for him. But he played against North Alabama, I believe it was, got injured, and that was when the chaos ensued after that. Still won the ACC championship then, and probably one of the, and no offense to Florida State, one of the most boring ACC championships I've ever watched in my entire life. You get to the bowl game, a bunch of people sits out. We know what happened. Do you think Norvell will allow Castellanos to stay in a game against East Texas A&M or Kent too long, because in the back of his mind, he's like, bro, I've got a good thing going here and I really don't want to ruin this. I mean, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think about that. The thing about that North Alabama game is Florida State was losing 13-0 when he got hurt. Like, they didn't come out and take that game seriously. And that's, I mean, the problem is not that Jordan was in too long. It was the fact that he had to be in at all. They should have come out and waxed that team, and they just weren't focused. And it was senior night, and all these things, right? So, Jameis was there, and he was wearing a Jordan jersey. And everybody's super emotional and you just think you're going to roll over a team. And they ended up beating the heck out of them. I think they beat them like 50-something to 13, right? They never scored again. But I do think that the mindset isn't so much about like, hey, we got to do this, we got to do that. I think they'll try to run him less in this game, in these next couple of games. They'll know they don't need that. They'll try and work on some of his passing stuff and get some of those guys involved. But yeah, I mean, I think the mindset was the biggest issue in that game. The fact that the other team was up 13-0. If you'd have gone up 14-0, Travis would have never taken off on a run ever, And so it's not putting yourself in a position to where you need Castellanos or Travis back then to run. And if you'd have done that, then you wouldn't have had the issues that you had and the injury that you had. So that's what I think it'll be with Norvell is, yeah, we're not going to run him because we're not going to need to, because we're going to take the game seriously and go beat the tar out of somebody. Saturday against East Texas State A&M should be really, really easy, and it should be really, really fun. And so just go beat the heck out of them, score a bunch of points, and go celebrate and, go to College Town afterwards and do what you want to do. So, yeah, I think that's kind of more of the mindset and why it'll be different this time. Knock on wood, though, because I can't take another one of those. Like, I'll just, it might be my last video at that point.
I don't blame you, man. I don't blame you. But before we go, I'm going to ask you about a few games we have coming up this weekend. So this weekend, we have South Florida and they're playing Florida. I looked at this, and right now I'm looking at the spread as of today, which is Labor Day. Florida is a 17.5-point favorite. Am I crazy that I believe that South Florida could pull an upset?
I don't know if crazy is the right word after watching FSU Alabama last.
Yeah.
I think that, college football has been wild so far, and, it may continue to be wild. So I really don't know if I feel great about USF being able to hold up in the trenches. I think that's where I struggle to see them having enough athletes. Like, I think they matched up really well with Boise State there. I don't think that they match up as well with Florida. I really like Florida's offense and defensive lines. I think they're some of the best in the SEC and thus the country, right? And so I do think they'll be really good. I would expect Brown to be able to run a little bit, but man, I don't think he's a very good passer, and I think Florida will kind of expose some of his weaknesses as a passer. I don't think they beat him by 30 or anything like I may have thought 2 weeks ago. Like, I've got a little more respect for South Florida than I did. I live in Tampa. Shoot, I'd love for them to do well and go up there and win. Not even just anti-UF bias, just more so like I like the local team to do well. But I'd be pretty surprised. I think that they could make this a game for a half potentially. Florida could get up big, and then they could kind of come back on some of the backups. But I'd be pretty surprised if this is not like a 17-point game. Is kind of where I'd have it, something like 34 or 17 or something, where Florida gets up, they come back a little bit, but the game's never in doubt. And Florida kind of cruises, plays some backups, doesn't let Lagway get out there with all his injury stuff, in the second half, and they kind of just cruise to a win. So not crazy, but I'm also the guy that said that Bama was going to win last week. So maybe I don't know what the heck I'm talking about, but I think Florida wins relatively easily.
Biggest game of the weekend is Michigan, Oklahoma getting together. Any thoughts on that one, or you just absolutely don't care?
No, I am very intrigued to see that, because again, I think it's the game of the week. I think it's, as I'm not crapping on the slate, because I will watch if it's Hawaii and Cal every week. Like, if that's all it is, I'm going to watch it. But I mean, that's the best game after such a good weekend with several top 10 matchups and top 15 matchups and everything else. That's the only game that I think you really say, like, oh, this could be like playoff implications at some point. Though I don't have Oklahoma or Michigan in there. But yeah, Sharon Moore going back to Oklahoma, Bryce Underwood, he looks really good. Again, granted, against a really bad team. John Mateer, who I think was the best quarterback out of the portal, him or Beck, and Jade Knott, who played at Cal, I just mentioned them. I think this is a really, really good test for a young Bryce Underwood, which is going to be very tough. And we've seen, young quarterbacks have to go into tough places to play and not have a lot of success. But man, if he goes in there and wins in Norman, the folks in Norman are not going to be very happy. But I like Oklahoma's defense a lot. I think that they'll be pretty stout against Michigan's offense. And then I think Oklahoma's offense does just enough to pull out the win. So I like Oklahoma here. I don't know, something low scoring, like 27-20 or something. I think it's a fun game. I think it's a good game, kind of low scoring ish, but I do think Oklahoma at home, their defense, John Mateer at quarterback, who I think could be really, really good this year. I think that Oklahoma is probably the safer pick here, but again, we're talking about a weird sport where weird things happen.
It sure does. Oklahoma is a 5.5-point favorite at this point. So it's still kind of like a toss-up. We'll definitely see. TJ, I've talked about it before, but tell us where we can find you, sir.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. For FSU stuff, it's Double Fries No Slaw here on YouTube or wherever you find your podcasts. And then national show. We've enjoyed doing a national show and getting to share incorrect thoughts about other teams too, not just FSU. College football addiction. No, we have a good time. Brian's been on a ton, so make sure that you come check us out over there.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on over there, and thanks for coming on